Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to begin this event in less than 1 minute. We're about 30 seconds out.
Moderating this with Derek. Hopefully, we run this thing pretty smoothly so that everybody gets, a feeling for Heidi and for Danny, of course, who are running for governor and lieutenant governor of Colorado. So with it, I think what we'll do first is we'll start off with a prayer, and then we're going to do the pledge, and then we'll kind of go into some rooms and whatnot. We may need the lights up for that just so that we can see it is rather bright up here. But ultimately, Derek, if you want to introduce
Country Republican Party. So when I begin an event, we begin our events that I'm involved with, and I'm sure all of you, by honoring the Almighty. I've asked my friend Pastor Jerome Perkins to please come and open us in prayer.
Say, let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord God Almighty. Father, I sense your presence here even now, and I thank you that you do hear from heaven. As we humble ourselves and turn from our wicked ways, this night is offered up to you, and that you would speak through each and every person here right now, that they would become the very essence of the Spirit of the living God. Father, we seek after truth. We deny all falsehoods. Father, we don't have to entertain lies. Father, it says that if we would resist the foolishness, it will flee from us. Father, it's my desire. It is my hope. It is your plan that directs and guides us as we move, live, and breathe by your Spirit. In the name of the one and only true God, which is truth itself, Yahweh, in the very name of Yeshua, the Christ, the I Am. Amen.
If I could ask for Mr. Scott Bottoms. Scott Bottoms is running for House District 15. Scott's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and the flag is just up here. If you will all take a moment and stand with us as we pay honor to our country.
Thank you. Let's honor our country and our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
So obviously El Paso is a very strong military community, and what I'd like to do is just take a moment, and if I could get the lights brought up briefly so that we can do this, and we're going to have another introduction afterwards. What I'd like to do is just give an opportunity for our veterans, active duty, those that have served, whether it's the reserves or whether it's the Guard, if you would just stand and be recognized, and if your spouse is with you as well. I would ask that your spouse please join you in standing, because we all know that our military families work as a family. Thank you so much for all that you guys have done, all of you in terms of service to this country and defending the freedoms that each and every one of us hold dear. I think at this point we'd like to go ahead and recognize some of the candidates that we have in the room.
Correct.
I'll turn that over to Derek.
We have joining us tonight various people who have made the sacrifice of campaigning to represent people in this room, people that are not in this room, people in this state, in our city, county, and state legislature. And we want to just thank you by recognizing you very briefly. Rachel Stovall is here, and she is running for House District number 17. Shauna Black is running for House District 18. Stand up, it's a little dark in here. Steve Schleicher wants to be your next county clerk. Just up the highway, one city is the city of Monument, Colorado. Mitch Leekund is running for the mayor of Monument, Colorado. And last on my list is Scott Bottoms, who is running for House District number 15. Have we missed anybody? If we have missed you, please just stand up and shout it out. Mary Bradfield, 21. Anybody else? Going once? Going twice? Old American. Well, thank you for coming to the first El Paso County Town Hall Forum for Republican gubernatorial candidate Heidi Danny and Lieutenant Governor Danny Moore. We are pleased to have you all here. We're joined by media. We're joined by friends. We are now going to bring the candidates out and let this party begin. I'm pleased to announce Heidi Danny and her running candidate, Danny Moore.
Danny is stuck on an interview there.
He's in an interview? Oh. Still? Okay. Danny apparently is stuck on an interview for a few more minutes. I would guess that some media type is getting a little bit long-winded. So we'll fire off with Heidi, and Danny will join us just as soon as possible. He's getting worked over by some reporter.
No. That's not how it works, Derek. The opposite way.
Well, I think if you want, what we can do, Heidi, is if you're okay with it, we can just start off with you and ask the first question. I'm going to step out of this light so that I'm not blinding myself. And the first question that we have has to do with transparency in education. And so with that, how would you promote transparency in public schools? And if you could be as specific as possible, that would be helpful.
Well, Tim, that's one of the reasons I'm running for governor. A few years ago, my kids were at Superior Elementary in Boulder Valley School District, and this was before woke was a thing. And my kids came home and told me some stories about an anti-bullying program that was very inappropriate. And I thought, well, why didn't we know about this as parents? And so a bunch of us parents that were fired up about it decided to go to the principal and say, why didn't we get notified about this? Why weren't we able to opt out? And she said, well, you can't opt out because it's so embedded in the curriculum, there's no opting out. And we all looked at her like, what? And once I dug into the program, the anti-bullying program, I found a pretty troubling paragraph about how they train teachers, and it was to deal with problematic parents. Now, who do you think the problematic parents were? And so that was my first, like, what the heck is going on here? And so we ended up trying to start a charter school called Ascent Classical up in Boulder Valley School District. I was one of the founders of Golden View Classical and then helped launch Ascent, a sister school out of that. So I thought, well, let's do this up in Boulder Valley School District. There's not a lot of options up there. We worked for about 18 months, me and Kim and Derek and some others, and we got about 700 children signed up for the school. We went in front of the school board, and we weren't just told no. We were shouted out of town. We were run out of town. It was terrible. They didn't want our ilk there, I guess you could say, and didn't agree with our perspectives and didn't want a charter school competing with the other public schools. And so we appealed it to the state. The state said, go back to Boulder, try again, and Boulder said no again. So my husband and I decided to move to Douglas County because of the schools, because I thought, I can protect myself and so can my husband, but our kids are in these classrooms all day long, and their little hearts and souls, we can't protect that all the time. And so we moved down south to get them a better education, and they're thriving now. And I want every parent in this state to have that same option, because we have school choice for those of us that couldn't afford to move to a different zip code or put our kids in private school or homeschool them. But the mom working 2 jobs in downtown Denver that's struggling to get by and can barely put gas and groceries on the bills cannot have school choice. She doesn't have school choice. So I want to have this funding follow the family so that families can make a different choice if their schools aren't working for them. One last thing on transparency. This is how badly my opponent and his party does not want you to see what's happening in the schools. They turned down a bill in this last session that was proposed to provide transparency in curriculum to parents. Why would they do that? That makes no sense unless you're trying to hide something. So transparency, choice, and competition are how we're going to get our schools back on track. With 60% of our kids not being able to read, write, or do math at grade level, it's critical.
Absolutely. Heidi, and part of that answer, you set me up. You fed the next question extremely well. So you're talking about the money following the student. I've heard you say that you support public school funding following the student to charter school, to private school, to homeschooling if necessary. How would that work, and how would you implement something like that?
Thanks, Derek. It's going to depend on if we win back the state Senate, which I'm pretty darn sure we will.
If we win back the state Senate?
And if we win back the House, that would help as well. So we'll have a plan based on any three of those scenarios, whether we do, we don't, or we get both. But we'd like to model it off of Arizona, the education savings accounts, and then also tax credits so that, traditional vouchers go to the government, the money goes to the government, and then they give it back to you, and there's always strings attached, right? So that isn't a great model, but education savings accounts and tax credits are a good way to do this. And we can either do it through the legislature or we can do it through a ballot initiative, probably a citizen-led ballot initiative if we need to, and I'll be the voice from the Capitol to make sure that happens. But really it's about making parents aware of what's possible if we do this. I love our public schools. I love our school teachers. Our teachers aren't getting paid enough right now. The average classroom gets about $250,000 in funding in Colorado, and only $50K of that goes to the teachers. So we're expecting a lot of our teachers right now. Let's give them more resources, more help and support, but let's also give them opportunity. If a family wants to put together other families and start a micro school, which is like 10 families getting together and hiring a teacher, they're paying very well, like $70,000 to $80,000 a year usually. And that's an opportunity for teachers, and it creates more choice and competitions in the schools. So I think that's the way we do it. We have to talk to parents, educate them on what this looks like, how it works, and then either get the legislature to help me do it or go through a ballot initiative.
Thank you, Heidi.
Tim, you look like God walking down. I'm
Yeah.
like, woo!
Well, I want to make sure I'm staying out of the light. So next question, still staying along the lines of education. We're well aware, at least many of us in the room are, that 60% of our students can't read or write at grade level. What would you do to help fix this across the state of Colorado?
Well, and even more tragic is that in Denver Public Schools, which used to be a shining light on the hill of a district, 95% of African American and Hispanic kids cannot read at grade level. I want to tell you why it's so important that we have to make sure that kids can read by the end of third grade. If you cannot read by the end of third grade, you are 4 times more likely to drop out of high school. 75% of the crime across America is by high school dropouts. It's directly connected. And Danny talks about how, to have a successful life, if you're in, a family that doesn't have a lot of resources and you may not have a lot of hope for a future, one of the most important things we need to make sure that those kids do is graduate from high school. And so our goal, Danny and I have decided one of our big goals is to make sure that every child in Colorado can read by the end of third grade. And right now, we're not even close. 60% generally in Colorado cannot read at grade level, and 70% cannot do math at grade level in Colorado. And as a regent at the University of Colorado, I see that from the higher ed perspective, and it really occurred to me about 2 years in as a regent that what needed to be fixed, the most important thing we needed to do was go back to K through 12 and make sure our kids could read, write, and math, and do math at efficiency. And that would help us in higher education graduate them on time, make it less expensive to go to college if they wanted to. But we've also got to inspire hope in our children and give them other opportunities like Google certification or working with a company, a manufacturing company that will train them. They may not need to go to a 4-year college. There's so many cool things you can do now to learn a trade, to learn a vocation, to get a certificate, to find a way forward without spending $100,000 on and it's not really a 4-year degree anymore, you guys, it's a 6-year degree for most kids and upwards of, $100,000 or more. So we've got to look big at big opportunities for our children. We've got to kind of turn the model on its head and make sure that as parents and community members, grandparents, that we're inspiring our kids to find something that they're passionate about, a career that they love, and also inspire them to not be afraid to fail, to try a lot of different things. I think that's really critical too.
Thank you. Every governor's race is a team race. There's the governor and there's the lieutenant governor. Heidi has chosen Danny Moore as her running mate, and he is now able to join us. Please welcome him to the dais.
Woo!
And I am now going to call an audible and ask Heidi to tell us in 30 seconds, because you vet, you interview, you go through all this stuff to choose a lieutenant governor's running mate. What made you settle on that man?
Danny. He's been such an incredible partner in this. Danny has a heart for kids like I do. And we both are so passionate about the American dream. He's lived it. I've lived it. And we want to make sure that every child in Colorado has the same opportunity that we did. I love Danny's wife, Susan. She's amazing. He's got a great family, and we've known each other for a long time. We were on the leadership program of the Rockies board together. Danny's, are you still on Colorado Business Roundtable, right? Yeah. So he's just a magnificent human being. I love working with you, Danny, and I think you're going to make an amazing lieutenant governor.
Okay. Let's see how light he is on his feet. Our next question will go to you.
Okay.
Okay? And then you can work your introduction in if you want to. We're talking education now. Many of this room know Sandra Bankus. Sandra is a former elementary school principal, if I remember correctly. And she submitted a question that was so good, we said, why don't you ask that question yourself? Hopefully Tim knows where she is, because I can't see a doggone.
I'm right here.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. So the question deals with school safety. What specific measures will you support to ensure our children are safe at school?
So I'm pretty sure you've heard me say this before, but I really feel like all the things in this world that we value most, we guard, right? We put guards around our money, we put guards around our house, we put guards around the things that we value. And I can't think of one thing we value more than our kids. And to me, it just doesn't make sense to me that parents want the police to go into the school after there's been a shooting with guns to save their kids, but not to be there before the shooting happens. And so we need to put more resource officers in our school systems. We need to train our teachers to better handle these situations. We need to get more mental health care for our kids so they don't feel hopeless, because that's what it is right now. Our kids feel hopeless. They feel like there's no future. And we should tell them that, because you're 13, 14, 15 years old, life hasn't even started. I like to tell people that I didn't really figure out this thing called life until I was 30, right? And so you have to give life a chance. And that's what we owe to our kids, because right now, part of the crisis that's in our community is our kids. And as Heidi always says, if our kids are not well, then nothing is good. And that's the reason why I'm in this fight. And so we will do everything we can to guard our kids, to safeguard our kids. We won't let politics get in the way. We'll do common sense things. And if that means to make sure we have armed guards at our schools, then we'll do that.
And Danny and I have talked about how tactically we will do this. I was on Governor Hickenlooper's School Safety and Youth in Crisis Committee, which went about a year, and it came out of the Claire Davis shooting at Arapahoe. We lost a beautiful young lady there, and her parents fought hard to provide transparency from schools, and so they tasked us with figuring out what the standard of care was for schools, and we worked for a year on this. The final day of the session, we went, and they said, thank you, but no thank you, we don't need your help. It was the weirdest thing. But out of it came this idea from my franchise background to create a pilot program called School Safety 360, which is an assessment tool. So we'd have an advisory committee of experts in public safety and education, mental health, that would create an assessment, which we did a draft of this, and It would be a 2-day assessment. It's kind of like when franchising, we would go out and make sure that everybody's meeting a certain level of care. And we would do this with all the schools, and the ones that were doing really well, we'd reward with a blue ribbon that parents could see and be proud of. The other ones, it would not be punitive. It would be a gap assessment that we would go in and help them and give them resources to fix the problems or the gaps where they are. The other thing I'd like to do is create an accountability dashboard for all parents in the state and grandparents too, that Danny and I will be held accountable to for fixing or making sure that our kids are safe. And we'll have a SWAT team that we can deploy if there are issues, not a SWAT team like a law enforcement SWAT team, but a SWAT team if a school's worried or has an issue or sees something coming that they're concerned about, then we can deploy them to make sure that we fix whatever problems are going on and give them tools and resources they need, so we're proactive, not defensive in it. And then finally, I'd like to launch a program called Reconnect Colorado, where we get kids kind of back out in nature. We get them off their screens. We get them talking about mental health. We get them having dinner as families together. We get them back, building community because they've lost that. They're feeling very isolated and alone. That's why we have one of the highest suicide rates in the country for kids, and also one of the top drug addiction rates for kids. So lots in there. I've put it out there. I'm happy to put it on the website if you want it, but we've got a pretty solid plan day one, and so that you can hold us accountable too to keep our kids safe, because we want nothing more than that.
Okay, our first 4 or 5 questions, we're dealing predominantly with education. We're now going to pivot and move to crime, law enforcement, and what we do to clean the streets of Colorado up. Anyone that's been watching the news anywhere in the country is aware that crime statistics, especially in our large cities, are on the move in the wrong direction for the most part. Law enforcement's been handcuffed, leashed, defunded. Lots of things have been happening. So general question is, what would you do to improve the status of law enforcement in this state? And the answer needs to not be general, it needs to be very specific.
So I think the first thing we have to do is we have to restore the confidence in our law enforcement, because they feel like the community's not behind them. And I don't think that that's the case. I think our politicians have created this narrative that's not true. The next thing I think we need to do is we need to fund our police officers. And when I say fund, I mean all the things that they need for training, more weapons training, more psychological training. We need to get them care, because I don't think people realize the stress that a police officer goes through day by day. And that stress needs to be taken care of through counseling. Those are the kind of things we need to fund. And the other thing we need to do is we need to restore their protections. It doesn't make sense to me that we send an officer out to do the most dangerous job and we've taken away qualified immunity from them. That's what we need to do. So those are the concrete things that we'll do on day one.
So I was raised by a reserve police officer who taught me to respect law and order. I have a pretty strong opinion about what's happening right now. It's disgusting, and it's not right for our kids. Our kids cannot feel safe if crime is through the roof here in Colorado. And one of those things that's making crime so bad is we are the 4th highest in the country in recidivism. So that means repeat offenders are causing most of these crimes. We are number 1 in auto theft, number 1 in property crime, number 2 in fentanyl overdoses in the country. This is Colorado, not Chicago we're talking about. So I'd like to replace as many of the people as I can on the parole board. I'd like to replace the heads of leadership at public safety, corrections, and justice. I'd like to appoint, thank you. I will have the backs of law enforcement, as Danny said. We'll address truth in sentencing. So if a truck driver kills 4 people in a fiery crash and he gets sentenced to 110 years in prison, I'm not going to step in and say, okay, you got 10 years and go around the justice process. We've also got to address bail reform and this catch and release mentality that you can do a crime and be out of jail in 6 hours before the paperwork's even done. Those are the things I'm hearing from law enforcement. On the fentanyl side, we've got to cancel our status as a sanctuary state, which doesn't allow ICE. Yeah. Tactically, why that's important, it doesn't allow ICE agents and law enforcement to cooperate and deal with the problem on the southern border of Colorado. And then we've also got to go back to criminalizing fentanyl. All of it, any little bit. And then finally, we need a public education campaign about this weapon of mass destruction, fentanyl, because it's destroying our state and our communities and starting to kill a lot of our children here.
Thank you, Heidi. And so kind of continuing along the fentanyl question or the response that you just gave, obviously we're seeing things that we haven't seen before in the sense of, fentanyl is now all of a sudden being labeled as Skittles, and it's coming out in colored pills where, drug dealers are specifically looking at targeting kids, specifically within schools. 1326 was a bill, and I think you just touched on a piece of what that bill did that we had in the legislature this past legislative session. And so I guess I'm wondering, just if you could go a little bit deeper and maybe hear from both of you on this. How do we move past? How do we fix the problem that we have here in Colorado? We know that 18 to 45-year-olds, it's the #1 killer, is fentanyl. 2/3 of overdoses across the country are a result of fentanyl. I think if you look at some of the statistics that are coming out of border protection as well as DEA, somewhere in the neighborhood of 20.4 million pills were confiscated just last year, and somewhere upwards of 30,000 pounds of fentanyl were confiscated last year. So it doesn't look like there's any end in sight. If you could elaborate a little bit more, how do we get past this problem? How do we fix that here in Colorado?
So that's a very good question, and it's a very big problem that we have. I heard a DEA agent say that the flood of fentanyl has already happened in our country. Well, there's something we can do about it. The first thing we can do about it is be aggressive about making sure that the I-25 corridor is shut down and that we stop and search vehicles. I don't care how much time it takes to make sure that we can stop the smuggling of fentanyl. When I was talking to an ICE agent, he told me that they don't smuggle people anymore because people can come and go as they will. They're now smuggling drugs across I-25 and I-70. So that's number one. Step up enforcement, step up searches to stop it, because if they know it's coming this way, they'll stop it. Number two, we got to educate our kids. We got to educate our kids about the dangers of fentanyl. There's not enough education going on. And then number three, the one thing we have to do, we have to get people in treatment. We have to hold the guys who are trafficking responsible for it, and we have to take care of the people who are addicted to get them off of it. If we do those three things, we can stem the tide. This is not a problem we can't solve. This is a problem we can solve. But you have to have resolve to solve tough problems. And that's why I'm on this campaign with Heidi and Danny, because she has the resolve to do the tough things, right? She has the resolve to stand up and say enough is enough. Because I ask myself all the time, how many kids must die? How many Americans must die? When you think about it, that 100,000 Americans die every year from fentanyl overdose. 100,000, that's twice as many people have died in Vietnam. And I remember the times reading in the history books about the protests that happened in Vietnam. So I asked the governor, how many more people must die? Is it 1,000? Is it 2,000? Is it 3,000? Does it have to be someone close to you? How many more people must die before we decide to make this an issue? Before we decide to make this a real issue? Because right now there are no task force. There are no law enforcement groups searching around it. They know what the problem is, and we're not solving the problem because our governor won't allow us to do that. And it's time for a change. And this is why I believe Heidi and Danny is the right person to be our governor, because under her, we'll stop this fentanyl crisis. We'll start the work to make sure it gets better, and we'll educate our kids. Because make no mistake about it, they are coming for our kids. They are coming for our kids. And what will we do to protect our kids? Anything.
People need to wake up to how dangerous Colorado is for kids now. Just in 4 years, suicides have skyrocketed. Drug addiction has skyrocketed. High-potency marijuana is a huge issue we're not talking enough about. We've got fentanyl. We've got the crime in the streets. We've got school resource officers being pulled out of schools instead of putting into schools. It truly is a dangerous place for children to live now. This is Colorado we're talking about. That's why you hear me say I'm a mom on a mission. I've done a lot in my career with Camp Bow Wow and won a lot of awards and entrepreneurial stuff. But the most important thing I've done is build my family, and I've got to protect them. I've got to protect my kids. I have twins that are 10, Jack and Jenna, and I have a 13-year-old Holly, and then Tori, who's here, who's 27. And I want them to stay in Colorado. I want my grandkids to stay here. I know you guys feel the same. And if we don't do the work right now, we are losing this state. We have 35 days left to save Colorado. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's not. The more I learn about what's happening behind the scenes in this state, the more terrified I am of our kids' future here. So Danny and I are going to lay it all on the line in the next 35 days, and we need your help. We need your help because it's going to happen on the ground. We're never going to have enough money to beat them in the airwaves. We've got to beat them on the ground, and that's all of you talking to your neighbors, your friends, and doing the work on the ground.
I've decided I'm going to ask my next question from way up here in the nosebleeds. I know you can't see me at all. Colorado currently has a shortage of law enforcement officers, as do a lot of places in the country these days. What specifically would you say are some of the reasons we are facing a law enforcement shortage, and what things would you do to improve hiring and retention in the law enforcement community in the state of Colorado?
Another great question. I think
Thank you.
I think the first thing we have to do is we have to give our law enforcement protection. When I go across the state and I talk to sheriffs and police officers in many different counties, the first thing they bring up to us is, we want to do the right thing, but we're human and we make mistakes. I don't want my family's home, my family's future to be put at stake because I make a mistake, right? And so that's the first thing we have to do is return those protections. Number two, we got to make it a better environment for them to work in. Right now, the people in political office have demonized our police officers. They've demonized them for taking care and protecting us. And when Heidi and I go to Hispanic communities, the first thing they say to us is we want safe neighborhoods. When we go to black communities, the first thing they say to us is we want safe neighborhoods. And what we're finding is that the problems that we all have are all the same. We want safe neighborhoods. We want professional law enforcement. And so we should encourage that. We should train them. We should pay them more money. There's a lot more money out there, and we're doing crazy, silly things with, and we should back our police officer with more funding. And those are the three things I think we can do to kind of encourage people to come back to Colorado, because a lot of people have given up on it. They've given up and they've moved. Well, I'm not moving. I'm going to stand and fight. I'm not moving.
I think Danny said it pretty well.
Okay, so moving on, I had to take my microphone off mute. Still along the same lines in terms of crime prevention and the issue of crime. We're hearing stats, auto theft, we're one of the highest in the country in terms of auto theft. We're seeing a continuation of legislation that says, we're going to reduce felonies to misdemeanors, we're going to reduce misdemeanors to petty offenses, even within fentanyl. 1 gram, you've got to have more than 1 gram 4 times before you're even looking at some sort of a drug felony 4. So there's all these issues that are going on, and with legislation, with policy, and all this is impacting the public. So how do you both work with law enforcement on the crime prevention side? What can you do there to help Coloradans and provide relief so that Colorado doesn't keep producing more victims?
So before I came here, we met with some law enforcement officers over at the hotel next door and listened and heard their stories. And I just kept saying, how do we fix it? What do you think? Like, what do you need to do your job? And they gave me an earful, which is good. I wanted that. But most of all, they want leaders who will respect them and support them and give them the tools and resources to actually do their job. They feel very confident they can turn things around when it comes to crime in Colorado, but not in the current environment. If you think about what happened in just 4 years in Colorado, all these terrible stats, number one in auto thefts, well, that's because they made it a misdemeanor to steal an auto under $2,000. And who does that hurt? That hurts the mom living in downtown Denver who has to get to work and daycare. When she gets her car stolen, it's not like she can go to the rental car company, everything's great, and she gets her new car within a couple weeks. It doesn't make any sense. This is Polis's problem and the legislature's problem. They are not doing the right things for our communities, and they've made bad decisions on bills, whether it was the auto theft bill or the the catch and release policies they put in place, the leadership they put in place for law enforcement across the state in their agencies, and also the fentanyl decision. Nothing has been more destructive to the state of Colorado that I can think of than that bill they did to decriminalize fentanyl. Then they went back this last session and said, oh, we're going to fix it. They didn't fix it. They made it worse. According to law enforcement, they said it's harder to prosecute drug dealers now because you have to prove their intent. So it was this weird smoke and mirrors thing they did. Why do they want this? Why don't they see what it's doing to our communities and our streets and our kids? It's destroying Colorado right now. And the media won't talk about it because, it doesn't look good politically. And the leadership won't talk about it, but we're talking about it everywhere we go. And there's always usually someone in the audience who's lost a loved one to fentanyl. Anybody? Yeah, there you go. It's devastating. So we're fighting for you, and we're going to be a voice for you and your family. And we're going to tell the stories of the kids and the loved ones that have lost their lives to fentanyl because it's affecting everybody.
Next question is coming from Derek, again in the dark. And this is a long one, so I'm actually going to read this one. When Jared Polis became governor of Colorado, he turned Colorado into a sanctuary state on May 28, 2019. Governor Polis signed into law House Bill number 1124. That new law prohibited state and local law enforcement from honoring immigration detainers and requests submitted by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. That prohibits law enforcement from holding criminal aliens already in custody until the feds can come and pick them up. How would you and your administration plan on working with ICE in addressing this issue?
Well, do the exact opposite of what they did. Yeah, I mean, it's got to be done right away. We have to do everything we can to roll back that initiative of sanctuary state status. That's ridiculous. We've got to give ICE agents and law enforcement the tools and resources they need to do their jobs. And we've got to talk to the people of Colorado about what's happening. It's not anti-immigration to stop that from happening. We want immigrants to come to our country and to our beautiful state. We want that. That's America. But bringing fentanyl across the border of Colorado is not how we're going to do that. So, Danny, I'll let you fill in the blanks, but it's got to be one of our first priorities.
Yeah, and one of the things that you don't hear about the sex trafficking that's going on in the state. These are children. You don't hear about that. You don't hear about the fentanyl. You don't hear about those things, and that's the impact. When our law enforcement has their hands tied and they're not able to do their job, this is the impact. And the first thing that we will do is we'll listen to the professionals, because when you're going to pass a law that affects law enforcement, don't you think you want to listen to what they have to say? And how many times does Governor Polis make a promise and then break it? Because he said he wouldn't make this a sanctuary state, but then he broke his word. And he said he would get rid of all the loopholes for special interests, but then he broke his word. How many more times will we let Governor Polis tell us one lie and then break his word? He said he was going to make Colorado a top 10 place to live, the safest place to live. Well, it's not that. It's the third most dangerous place to live. So at some point, there has to be accountability. And that accountability comes from the voters. And I don't really care if you're a Democrat or not. I don't care if you're a Republican or not. We have to hold our governor accountable. We have to hold the legislature accountable, because what they've done to our state has been on purpose. And instead of standing up and saying, we're sorry, we made a mistake, we're going to correct this, they're doubling down on it. And that's what this election is about. That's the only reason why I'm in this election. I'm not a politician. I'm a small business guy that came from the projects, who joined the Navy, who was honored enough to retire from the Navy as a Master Chief, so I know what hard work it looks like. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to listen to law enforcement, because when they say that these laws are going to make us less safe, that's what these laws are going to do. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to listen to law enforcement.
Thanks, Steve.
All right.
Right. Hey, Tim, I want to call an audible.
Yeah, go ahead.
So most often when you do these sorts of events, you always run long because you get these long-winded politicians who don't know how to give a concise answer. Tonight, we have a couple of non-politicians, a couple of business people who simply answer the question and then move on. So we're actually a little bit ahead of the clock. How about we throw a question or two from the audience? Anybody have one you want to blindside them with?
You have something about military, possibly?
I don't know if we've been on the road for a while.
Here we go.
It'd be hard to come up with a question that we haven't, yeah.
Okay,
Let-
this is
let's-
going to test you.
I hope.
Let's throw it to this gentleman right here. I think he's got a good question for us regarding our military.
Hi, Heidi and Danny, Jarvis Caldwell. So as you're aware, Colorado Springs has a very robust veteran community here. We have 5 military installations just in El Paso County alone. At the same time, we also see a lot of horrible trends in the veteran community with suicide and drug addiction and joblessness and homelessness and things like that. So I was just wondering, what do you all plan to do to address maybe some issues within the veteran community?
Well, Danny told me when I signed up to join me, he said, give me all the really, really tough jobs. And as a veteran of 24 years, that's one of the things I've said. I really want you to focus on making sure our veterans are cared for and loved and appreciated here. So I'm going to let Danny take the front on this one.
Yeah, I'll gladly take this one. So I don't know if people realize, but there's nearly 500,000 veterans that call Colorado home. That's a lot of people. Most of them live in rural counties, okay, Pueblo, farther on the western slope. In order for them to get care, they have to drive all the way to Denver to get care. That's shameful. We should put the care where the people are at. And over the last 3 years, there's been just a slight change in the funding for Veterans Affairs in our budget. Even though the budget continues to grow by billions of dollars, we're not investing into the veterans who gave everything to their country. That's mental health care, that's housing, that's counseling, because we know how to come together. And I dare say that sometimes policies stand in the way of that. So the reason I'm in this race is for the people of the state, and part of the people are the veterans that call Colorado home. And so it will be nice to have someone in the governor's mansion who know what it's like to serve, who know what it's like to make that sacrifice. I jokingly said my kids raised themselves along with my wife because I didn't see them. And I don't think people realize how hard it is to be in the military and to deploy as much as we do. And so one of the things you have from us is that we will do everything we can to make sure that we can support our veterans, because they shouldn't be homeless. No one should be homeless. This is the United States of America. This is not a place where we're okay with people living on the street. We can get them care, we can get them support, we can get them shelter, and we can get them back on their feet. And we'll work with Veterans Group to make sure we can do that, because I believe the answer is not in government. I believe the answer is in the communities where people are at, and we need to work with those communities on those tough problems.
Appreciate that. So let's move on to the next question here that I just received. We're going to talk a little bit about inflation. Let's talk about inflation. So we know that our inflation rate is 8.9%. We know interest rates now on mortgages are up at 7% to try and curb inflation. And so the question I have is, how do we roll back inflation in Colorado as we face the highest inflation in the country?
Yeah, here in Colorado, nationally it's about 8%. Here in Colorado, 15.6%. The highest in the nation here in Colorado since Biden took office. It's a shame. It's a shame. It doesn't have to be that way. But Jared Polis has grown the size of government by almost 25% since he got into office. He's added 4,000 new full-time employees into the agencies that run our lives. He's added 85 new taxes and fees that we can count. I'm sure there's a lot more. He's made it harder and more expensive to live here, to raise a family, to run a business. In fact, he likes to tout that he's made the state more business-friendly, more startup-friendly as an entrepreneur. Well, that's a bunch of baloney. In this last quarter, 27% of small businesses, 27% more small businesses closed than the previous year. Businesses are being suffocated by regulations, red tape, taxes, fees. We've grown the size of government so that it's out of control. And you've heard me probably say, I want to do something big and bold. We're going to take Colorado to zero income tax over 8 years. And guys, in typical politicians' fashion, they're like, you can't do that. There's no way. We've got to refill the coffers. How are you going to refill all that money? I'm like, well, I'm not. Our state budget has doubled in the last decade. We are spending too much money in Colorado. I need to get that money back into the pockets of the people of Colorado. That's how you solve inflation. That's how you ramp up the economy. And it means changing maybe the way we do Tabor refunds so they're income tax deductions and they're permanent. It means changing fees to taxes. Imagine that. It means finding some fraud and waste in the budget. Do you think we can maybe find 5 or 10%? Yeah, so we're going to order a special audit in the first weeks of our administration to find that fraud and waste and get rid of it. It means getting rid of special tax exemptions. It means getting rid of Polish pork. It means reducing the size of bureaucracy in this state by 10% a year in our first term, 40%, because it is out of control under Jared Polis and the Democrats, and we're going to get it back skinny down to the right place, the right budget, and make sure also that we're honest with you guys, that we're transparent about where the money's being spent. That's why we did that press conference and put out a new transportation plan, because that 260 that passed a couple years ago that raised your taxes $5 billion over the next, 10 years or so, well, that actually doesn't have an end to it, is a boondoggle. Only 1/3 of that money goes to actually fixing the roads. The rest of it goes to pet projects of Jared Polis and the Democrats. So what we want to do is take that back to the people of Colorado with a very specific list of projects that we worked with transportation experts around the state to come up with. It'll sunset after 10 years. The taxes are already there. Jared Polis and the Democrats already passed them. So we're just going to take it back to the people of Colorado, and we might massage that little retail delivery fee out of there. That's ridiculous. And we're going to get your approval to fix the roads that you care about. When they say, but what about the ozone and the climate change? Well, congestion is one of the biggest offenders that affects our ozone. And finally, I'll stop this rant in just a second. Jared Polis did not submit the science to the EPA that all the other governors have done, because 70% of our ozone problem is not us. It's from out of state. It's natural sources. And now he's saying, I'm fighting the EPA to get that overturned. All he had to do was file the report. He's messing with us like he usually does. It's going to increase the cost of gas in Colorado starting late next year by 30 to 50 cents a gallon, that decision, because we have to use blended fuel just like California. So it's all smoke and mirrors with Jared Polis and the Democrats. I've had it. Danny's had it. The more we learn about how things operate as we're running, the more disgusted we are, and the more transparent and honest we're going to be with you as leaders in this state.
Well,
Sorry, I took up a bunch of time.
No, she gets fired up. I love it. I love it. I mean, this is what you're going to get from a governor. You know, someone who has your interests at heart, not her own. Someone that has the interests of the state at heart, not her own. This is the kind of fighter we need up at the Capitol. Someone who will stand for you. Someone who will respect you. I said the other day that I don't think people care what they call, but people want to be respected. And when your voice is not heard, you feel disrespected. And that's what we need. We need your voices to be heard. So, no, you go on as long as you want to, Governor.
well, Heidi, you briefly mentioned something very important. Here in Colorado, we have a fantastic law called the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which some people tried unsuccessfully to repeal a couple of years ago. We all received Tabor refunds this year, but they came with what some would call is a bit of a spin from the governor's office. What are your thoughts on this year's Tabor checks?
Oh boy, here we go again. So I was the one that chaired that effort a couple of years ago to protect Tabor, no on Prop CC, and Jared Polis was against me, and he lost, which he's going to lose again. But my goodness, what a crafty little thing that was to use $3 million of taxpayer money to move the payments up and then put a letter in that it didn't even talk about Tabor, did it? It just said, here's a check from me, Jared Polis, to use however you want. Well, people across Colorado aren't stupid. They're very smart, and they see through that. Just like a lot of other crafty things he's done, like putting $3 million into the Republican primary to try and take me out there, putting $10 million into the race so far of his own money to try and take us out at the knees. This isn't about money and airwaves. We've got to tell Jared Polis this is an election, not an auction, and our votes will not be bought again. We're smart. We know now. And he and the Democrats can buy as many polls as they want that look like we're losing. We're not losing. I'm going to let you go on that rant. We are not losing. We've got the hearts and souls and the minds of the people across this great state, the farmers and ranchers that are upset, the energy workers that are upset, the parents that are upset, the small business owners that are upset, law enforcement that's upset. You tell me who he has on his side. So I'm going to let you take it.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. Even the people in Boulder are upset because crime in Boulder has gone up 80%. 80%. When law enforcement in Boulder can't protect their citizens like law enforcement anywhere else, even they are done. So no matter if they're Democrats or Republicans or unaffiliated, everyone we talk to say the same thing. No one has ever told me don't talk to them. They asked me, am I a Republican? I say yes. They said, okay, give me the material. I'm voting for you guys. Whether it be Hispanic or not, whether it be black or not, we're having conversations with people that have never seen a Republican. We're having conversations with people because we want them to know that their issue is our issues. And we're not some evil group of people who don't care. We're your neighbors. We're the people who come out and move your trash cans in when you're not home. We're the people who come out and used to pick up your paper, but nobody gets the paper anymore. Okay? Okay? But I'm going to tell you, don't be fooled. They want you to give up. They want you to think this race is over. Well, I'll tell you this. If the race is over, why is it you see 3 or 4 commercials before the news comes on every day? They're still spending money. You know why? Because we're winning. We're winning. So I'll say this last thing. You know, you hear a lot about diversity and you hear a lot about what's going on. And you say, why aren't they talking about this campaign? Because there's never been a campaign like this in the state of Colorado from any party. Why are they not talking about a strong mom who's an entrepreneur and a survivor and a hard worker? Why are they not talking about a black man who came from the projects, who's now a conservative, a military, served in the military, and a small business owner? These are success stories that we should be telling our kids. Why are they not talking about it? Because it doesn't fit their narrative. Why I'm telling you, people are waking up. People are waking up, and they see what we're offering, and they see that it's nothing in it for us. We simply want to serve. And when you want to serve, people can see that, and they'll get behind you. Just watch. Just watch. They're going to get behind us.
I appreciate that. And to shift gears just a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about rural Colorado. Our agricultural communities are key to our state's supply chain and food and other essential commodities. How would you support rural Colorado as governor and lieutenant governor?
Thanks, Tim. Our farmers and ranchers, our energy workers, our small towns across this Colorado are ticked off. They feel disrespected. They don't feel heard. When the governor does a meat out day, it pokes him in the eye. The second largest industry in the state, the ag industry. How do you think that makes him feel? When he doesn't stand up for their water rights, when he cedes them to the federal government and plays footsie with California and Arizona and says, oh, we'll work something out. No, we need to protect Colorado's water and what's rightly ours. We need to support our farmers and ranchers. They produce amazing food. We've got to have their backs. Danny and I have been all over this state. I've been to 64 counties almost twice now, and I've toured farms and ranches across this beautiful, beautiful place we live in. And they are not happy or okay with what's happening. It's destroying generations of farmers and ranchers here in Colorado. They are the heart and soul of our state. And we have made a pledge that we will be a voice for rural Colorado. We're going to address kids. That's our first priority. Crime, the cost of living, and we are going to be a big voice for rural Colorado and get our energy industry back to work. Why on earth, thank you. Why on earth, if the Democrats care about clean land, clean air, clean water, do they not want to produce oil and natural gas here where we do it better than anywhere on the planet? We have the strictest regulations on the planet, and instead they want to shut down pipelines and go to Venezuela and Saudi Arabia. Do you think they care about the environment? Do you think they care about our ozone layer? No. The energy workers that live across the small towns around our state, the coal miners, the folks running the power plants that they're shutting down that produce amazing energy here in Colorado. And they don't have a plan to replace the energy, you guys. They don't have a plan. I sat with the people who run the power plant up in Craig. I went hours with them on trying to understand the numbers and say, how are they going to replace all this energy? They're like, they don't know. They just want to do it. It's part of the Green New Deal at all costs, at all costs. And it's going to destroy our small towns across the state. So I'm very passionate about that. I grew up in Monument, which is a small town, not rural. It used to be kind of out in the boonies, but not really anymore. I just have a heart for these small towns. My favorite one that I discovered on the campaign trail, and I'm going to blow it for them because I keep talking about it, is this little old silver mining town called Rico in southwest Colorado. It's this beautiful little town in the middle of the mountains. And you've got this mix of old history. It was a silver mining town. Then they decided not to do silver mining, so they shut it down. And then they've got this new millennial-run coffee shop that's amazing and beautiful right in the middle of it. But it's just this, it's like the perfect example of the dichotomy that we're facing in these small towns. Some of them want to grow, some of them don't. But as a governor and lieutenant governor, we've got to support them in whatever direction they decide to go. So.
How are they going to replace that energy? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. Here's something that affects every single person in this room. Our roads in Colorado rank 46th nationally. That's 46 out of 59 states. Or 57, what do you say, 56? 46 nationally. You recently released your transportation plan to help get Coloradans moving again. How does that plan work?
So I'm going to start this answer. I'm going to let Heidi finish the answer because she certainly knows a lot of the details. But I'll say this. When you've driven the roads around this state, you know how bad the roads are. I want a road that's like Highway 36. Because when I drive down I-25, it's a washboard. And when I get on 36, man, is it smooth. I want all the roads to be that way. Because I'm telling you, the potholes around here are so deadly. Every single day I pass cars that have had flats from hitting potholes. We have to do better. You know, I jokingly said that I ran into a pothole the other day. It was so deep, I actually had time for coffee before I came up out of it. That's not much of an exaggeration. The promise of 10 years of fixing our road, it's time for that promise to be kept, and Heidi Ganal has a plan to do that.
Thanks, Danny. And that road that you so enjoy, that 36 that has the HOV toll lane now and was a private-public partnership, leads right to Jared Polis's house. Isn't that funny? You know, he bragged about having a combustion car the other day in the debate, and I thought, you just ticked off your whole base, buddy. You expect everybody to get an electric car, including the young mom who's just trying to get by, and it's totally unrealistic. But there's nothing realistic about the Democrats and Jared Polis's plan to fix the roads. 260 is a boondoggle, and I talked a little bit about it before. But it's all part of the Green New Deal, you guys. They don't want us driving on the roads. That's why they won't fix them. There's a lot of COVID money still sitting there in a pot waiting for something to be done. Boy, could we use it in education to help our kids learn how to read. Boy, could we use it to help fix our roads. Boy, could we use it to fix I-70, because when we're campaigning, it's a total, you know what, shoot, trying to figure out if you're going to be able to get across I-70 or not to get to Grand Junction. Can you imagine how that feels as a trucker or a company who needs supplies on the other side? It's completely destroying the Western Slope in some aspects because there's no predictability about it. They don't want to fix the roads. It's part of the Green New Deal. You know, Jared Polis tries to act like he's this moderate guy, and he's got some of the most extreme policies in the country right here. He's implementing the Green New Deal to stop us from driving our cars, to drive up the cost of gas, to put this EPA thing in place. He's also put in one of the most extreme abortion bills in the country right here. He's also been extreme against COVID. Everybody's like, he's kind of moderate in COVID. Baloney. He shut down our schools. He shut down kids' sports. He shut down churches. And he kept pot shops open. We also had the highest nursing home death rate in the country in the fall of 2020. Do you guys know that? No, because the media won't cover it. Actually, Colorado Public Radio broke it, this story. He did a backroom deal in the fall of 2020 with a donor's kind of mentee, a 25-year-old entrepreneur who had a testing kit company, bought $90 million worth of testing kits, put them in all the nursing homes, took the other ones out. And before long, the nursing home directors were saying, this isn't right. Something's wrong with these testing kits. They waited 17 days to pull them out. And it caused the highest nursing home death rate in the country for 2 months in the fall of 2020. Worse than New York. We need to hold him accountable for this stuff. If the media won't talk about it, we will. We'll give you the ammunition to talk to your neighbors, your friends. Folks who are like, oh, he's not that bad. He's okay. He's a moderate. There's nothing moderate about Jared Polis.
Moving along to another important question that we've gotten several times has to do with water. And I think here in Colorado, everybody understands the importance of water. We're all thankful for any bit of moisture that we can get our hands on. But how would you ensure that we have enough water for all of our state?
So I think the first thing we have to do is acknowledge the fact that we have a water issue. I think our state's been ignoring it. They've been pushing it off on the federal government, which is not going to solve anything because, you know, they can't solve anything. We need innovation. We need public and private organizations with innovation so that we farm better, so that we use our water more efficiently, so that we reclaim more of that water. The other thing we need a project that brings more water here. There are states that have too much water, and we don't have enough. So why not create innovation to pump that water here? And the other thing we have to do, we have to have controlled growth. I know that's not popular with people, but you have to plan growth. And when you're building homes that don't have enough water, that doesn't make sense to me. And so we have to be smart about it.
Yep. Danny, you're right. And I'll also say store, baby, store. Store, baby, store. We've got to get these storage projects through. We can't study it anymore like Jared Polis and the Democrats constantly want to do. We got to just get these storage projects done because we're letting a lot of our water flow right out of the state. We've got to make sure we protect what's ours, and we've got to make sure Colorado decisions are made by Coloradans.
I'll come back down here with you for this next one. Well, you don't realize how bright it is when you're up there. This is ridiculous. You mentioned in passing, answering another question, something about Colorado gasoline prices getting ready to go up by 30 cents, depending upon where you read, 30 to 40 cents, due to the governor's action or inaction, depending on how you look at it. Can you expand on that and please explain to the people what that's all about?
Thanks, Derek. Yeah, it's called a 179B determination letter. And every governor before has submitted it, basically saying, hey, 70% of our ozone problem is not our problem. So can you waive this requirement like California has to use blended fuels? Because blended fuels cost a lot of money to create. Suncor is actually gearing up their facility because they knew Polis was going to do this to make it. But that is going to cost us 30 to 50 cents more for our gas starting at the end of next year. And he threw a fit and said, oh, I'm fighting with the EPA to say we can't do this. You got to do better. He's the one that created the problem. Jared Polis is so good at creating problems and then saying, hey, I'm just the guy to fix it. Think about all the times he's done that. And this is one of those. You know, we can go green, we can go renewable over the long term, but he has gone too far, too fast, it's too aggressive, it's hurting the people that need low heating bills and low gas prices the most. We've got to have compassion for them. We've got to take it slower. We can't destroy our livelihoods by trying to do too much too quick to get to renewables. And guess how they, have to make renewables? A lot of the renewables are created by using natural gas. Funny enough. Yeah. I think somebody told me the electric cars are about 60% petroleum based. Is that right? Have you heard that?
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. Today we've covered infrastructure, education, crime. I think we're close to wrap up. And so just a final question for you both. What do you want to make sure that each of us walk away from this evening knowing about you and the campaign?
Wow. So what you see is what you get, right? I'm not totally polished. I just call it like I see it. I want you to know about this campaign that no one is fighting harder. No one is fighting harder for the citizens of Colorado than Heidi and I. 3 months ago, I gave up my life. A year ago, Heidi gave up her life. And when she talks about my wife, I got to tell you, my wife hadn't mowed a lawn in 20 years. And she's mowing the lawn now for me. So this is a really important fight for us. And I want you to know that we're reaching across the aisle and we're talking to people. Because the problems we're talking about tonight, those problems are not just Republican and Democrat problems. The inflation is real. The high energy prices are real. This winter, people are going to see a 54% increase in their electric bill. Those are going to hurt the people who can least afford it. Inflation is going to hurt the people who can least afford it. You want someone to fight for you. You want a champion on your side. That's what Heidi Ganal and I will be. And I encourage you, we have to be unified in this fight. I know there are many issues out there that we are concerned about, a lot of them. And those are important issues. But nothing can be more important than our kids. Nothing can be more important than our safety. Nothing can be more important than our prosperity. Because if we don't have those three things, all those other issues can't be addressed. So I'm asking for us to be unified around the principles of freedom and not about a single issue. And if we do that, we will win November 8th.
We're going to beat Jared Polis and his kabillions of dollars is on the ground. You are the ground. This is how we're going to do it for the next 35 days. Give it your all. Ask your friends and your community members. Just for 35 days, get involved, get engaged, share on social media. Republicans are not great at commenting and sharing on social media. Like, we have other stuff going on. We don't, yeah. But, we've got to just educate voters, get them excited. We have a bunch of rallies and forums coming up, lots of stuff going on down here in Colorado Springs. Love to have you part of the movement. This is all of our fight. We're just a voice for all of you. We're happy to be a voice for all of you, but we can't do it without you. Thank you.
Let's assume for the moment somebody is listening and not watching. Where would they go to learn more about the campaign?
So go to HeidiForGov.com. You can find out everything. You can find out where to follow us at, how to give, how to support us. Talk to anyone with a Heidi shirt. What I tell people is this: if you don't have a Heidi button, get one. And then wear that to the grocery store. And then wait for someone to ask you, who's Heidi? Because there are people who are still asking that question. And you say, oh, well, let me tell you. Or stand next to them at the grocery line as they're ringing up their groceries and say, that's pretty high, isn't it? and then have a conversation with them about how Heidi's fighting to lower inflation. Talk to them about the issues that are at hand. So go to HeidiForGov.com and lend us your support.
Thank you.
So we've had a full night of questions, and we've covered a lot of topics. It says here on the script that we're supposed to have closing remarks, Derek, but I don't think that we need to have closing remarks.
How are we supposed to follow an act like that?
I don't know. I don't know.
That's not going to happen.
I think I'm going to call an audible, and we're gonna skip our closing remarks. But if I could get Asia Dyer down here, I think there was some comments that Asia wanted to make part of Asa, I'm sorry, Asa. Is Asa still here?